on the video.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Demystifying AI for MSPs, our broadcast where we have a roundtable discussion about everything going on in the world of AI and really talk about some great things with some really great guests. My name is Will Dowling. I am a product marketing manager here at ConnectWise, and as it shows on the screen, apparently it is also my birthday. So for my birthday, I get to talk to some really great people today. I'm going to let my regular colleagues introduce themselves first, and then we will get to our special guest for today.
So my name's Kyle Jackson. I am responsible for, I'm the Director of Innovation Labs here at ConnectWise. So you know that.
Keith Sartain, Senior Director of IT.
All right, Ian, do you want to introduce yourself?
After their regular, I'm the irregular one.
Yeah,
so
you get to be my my special one today.
My name is Ian Barkin. I have a background in outsourcing and automation. I'm an author, an instructor, and a aspiring influencer and investor in the future of work.
You forgot one. Author, right?
I write things.
You write things. So you literally wrote the book on intelligent automation.
I wrote a book on intelligent automation.
The book is what I hear. So for those of you in the audience, if you have questions, if you have things that excite you as we're going through and talking through topics today, please post them in the comments. We want you to be involved. We want you to talk to us. We want you to throw questions our way. That makes it a lot more fun for us and helps get you the answers you need. So
I think we get to win a prize if you guess Will's age today.
Right.
So we'll figure that out in the comments.
There you go. Oh, Lord. All right. New prize today. Got it. Today only. So I'd like to start off, as everyone probably knows, with what's got you excited this week. I want to start with Kyle.
So, man, there's so many things to talk about like every week, but it just seems like a theme for me. And there are reasons why it's a theme for me, but I'm paying attention to what's happening with Ideogram and with Runway, basically the Sora competitors in the market who are, we've kind of hit this mark where all of these ideas, all of these companies who had these cool ideas are starting to move to a place where the ideas are becoming products.
Yeah. Right.
They're and it's not just their engines anymore. It's, they've circled the engines with, enhanced capabilities Runway has some new stuff that they've just released. Ideogram, for my money, which they're getting my money, have done a fantastic job of not just building the engine. Like everybody's known they're great with text. Like they were the first ones to do text generation, and you could literally say, "Hey, give me a newspaper," and have it say X, Y, Z on it, where everybody else failed to do that. So they unlocked that early, but they've done a good job of circling it with tools around it. So they've had a big release. So that's exciting. It's cool to think now. It also, if you consider the fact that, okay, I put in a prompt and there's about a 30-second delay for them to generate that. So if you think about the time lapse on that,
right? So
how quickly when are we going to get to a place where we're doing actually streaming live?
Yeah,
generative streaming live, which I know there are many companies chasing, like gaming, with that, but at some point we're going to break that threshold where it's going to be fast enough and they're putting enough compute behind it to where I can ask it a question and get a response immediately. And
did you see this? Someone actually tried to do that. They put the Quake game from way back, and they did that because it was low resolution, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
But they and actually the AI, you navigate, it was all AI generated. So some of the scores that came up would like change, and you could say, "Hey, that's not right." But otherwise, you couldn't tell. You navigate through this virtual environment, and it was all AI generated.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. It's real-time AI.
So, I mean, that's exciting. It's going to change the way we interact with systems, and not just in gaming, but like, I, as an MSP, let's just go practical. As an MSP, I need to create a video for training purposes, like, and not even like, hey, I'm going to train my own employees, but like, hey, let's create some content to help our customers know how to use this system, right? Okay, if you don't have the personnel to do that, this is now a very easy path into professionalizing the efforts to really drive home value.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
your end user and your end client. So that's cool what that's going to do. On the other side of the spectrum, though, we have all this risk. We have all this compliance. We've talked some about this. Well, thank you, California. They've proposed a bill,
saw that.
SB 1047. Sounds
Well
like
named,
sounds like the
Yeah.
dating of
Sketchy.
Star Trek log. But in that process, that they're looking at, which is relevant because a lot of what's happening in the AI ML space is happening in California. So that's looking at risk. It's looking at they're also included in a passage about personhood. Obviously, what's AI generated versus what's real, and how does that real person protect the sanctity and control of their own image. So interesting. Again, it's not passed into law. It's not nobody's held to it yet, but the conversations are happening. And again, in our space, we're not we're not immune to the conversations of regulation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's going to continue to come for us. But in this factor, I don't think it's going to come fast enough. Like I really feel like I am anti-regulation. I am not on the regulation fence, but there's enough Skynet. There's enough realness to abuse. That I can't
I think
ignore
most
it.
of the AI companies have been asking for regulation. They want to have guardrails. I think they want to move fast and know the guardrails up in front. That's probably a smart way to tackle.
Yep.
To be in front of it. And it was kind of a mixed bag on where there's previous versions of this bill, and people, Anthropic was, giving feedback, and OpenAI, but kind of a mixed bag, 50-50. Some people still want some tweaks to it, but I think it's generally a pretty good first stab at how we can put a framework around, addressing the fears that people are going to have as this thing matures.
Yep. And it's going to be interesting to see what regulation sticks the hardest, because it's going to come from a couple different angles. But this one is the first proposed one that will have potentially the direct impact on them, because that's where most of them are incorporated. So they won't be able to ignore it.
Fascinating. Like I would agree with you. Like, one of the things that I found fairly interesting, I don't know if it's got me excited or terrifying this week, but I saw an article, I think it was yesterday or the day before, on how like the Argentinian government's planning to use AI to predict future crimes. Like, I'm pretty sure we've had a few movies about why that's a terrible idea, but the fact that that's a potential reality is like huge.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that whether or not you know it or not, they've been doing that for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've just been doing it manually.
Yeah.
Right. So my brother actually was employed at the police department in his early career, doing MIS and again, trying to figure out, okay, there's new construction going on. We're going to have more theft at job sites. So like they've been doing that. So yes, why not?
Yeah.
Is it scary?
Yeah.
Anything can be abused.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's really kind of the thing that I guess everyone really needs to realize is anything can be abused, regardless of whether it's the big scary AI, regardless of whether it's mundane technology or even just people. Like, that's a very solid point on that. Keith, what's got you excited this week? Or did you have anything else, Kyle?
We're good.
All right.
I got three. Only one of them is kind of big. Cerebrus. We follow the processors. The state of the processors. They do a wafer scale engine, is what they call theirs. And I've got some more insight on why they went wafer scale. Like, that just seems like extreme. It's like taking something the size of a record that you usually would subdivide into hundreds of chips, carve up and then you would see which ones didn't have defects, and then you might sell 90% of those. Well, they just said, well, what if we build, what they found out in AI is you end up rejoining a bunch of these chips with interconnects so that you can make a cluster. And they're like, well, what if I just made a cluster, and instead of having an external memory, I just built the memory right on the big chip.
Yeah.
And I made one big chip using the entire wafer, the entire piece, instead of subdividing it. And then they made it defect tolerant. So rather than cutting out the pieces you don't like, you keep the pieces you don't like, but you have circuitry that allows you to work around it or survive a fault. Right. So they built a big processor. They're on the 3rd version of it, and they're doing what Grok did. Grok, the processor company, instead of selling that, they said, I can make recurring revenue, and they're hosting now. So now they're doing inference, fastest inference engine right now available. 450 tokens a second on Llama 70B, which is the most popular open source model being used out there, and only 60 cents per million tokens. That's really inexpensive. So
I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to put on the J hat and say, well, how is that relevant? How is it relevant to MSPs?
Well, yeah, cheaper inference can do a few things. One, it's obviously save cost, but two, especially if you're doing agentic stuff, right, where you have multiple interactions with a model, and you might even do chain of thought stuff. You might even say, are you sure that is right? These type of things where you keep asking an AI, and maybe it spouted off a little early and its first response wasn't perfect. You can interact with it more often. You can do it more time. If it's cheap and fast,
right,
you can do a number of interactions and then return the result to the user, and you can refine it. And then some people will actually do that across models. And I've even seen one where they do it with 3 models and then have a 4th model that's a moderator and says, I'll just pick the best answer. But that gets really slow if you have slow inference.
Yep.
But 450 tokens a second is really fast. You're probably going to be 25 tokens a second if you do OpenAI.
That's a huge difference.
If you catch it on a good day, you might hit 50 or 60, but 450, pretty consistent is really fast. So that was the first thing. The other one, I wanted to talk about Strawberry for just a second.
Right.
So OpenAI, a year ago, they fired the CEO of the fastest growing company in history. It's 2 weeks after he went on stage and said something like, every once in a while you get to see behind the curtain of innovation and you're surprised, or something like that. So he had seen an innovation. He's fired 2 weeks later. There was an innovation for a long time. It's called QStar. Lots of speculation on what that was. They have now confirmed that QStar is Strawberry. Strawberry is a technology that they're integrating. They're going to release with either 4 level models or their 5th gen model, or both. But just want to give a little color on what we know about what it might be. The Q and Star were actually meaningful. Q learning, old school method. You can think of that especially around gaming. I think that's where it derives from. Finding the shortest or best path from point A to point B through a maze, or finding a solution that's the lowest cost. You create some kind of cost mechanism for you to get from somewhere or to get to some outcome, and then you find the shortest cost without doing every permutation, and finding. So that's one way that we can think about that. And then STAR was a white paper a couple of years ago, self-taught reasoning, effectively kind of stepping through a couple different options, and then whatever reasoning steps you took that won, you feed back into the model. So and then it becomes a better reasoner. So if you give it enough scenarios, let it walk through it, try 3, 5, 100 options, find the one that gives you the best answer, feed that back to the model so it gets smarter, and you keep doing that. Well, what we're learning with Strawberry is that, GPT next, which we think is going to be 5, they may call it something else.
Right.
They're using Strawberry to find the best answers and the best reasoning, and then train that model even better. So it's not even, it's not just going to be a 10 times bigger model from a training and parameter count perspective, but it's going to have these things built into its training. So
Now,
the combination of those 2 things, we think, is going to be another step function in the quality of models.
so just quick topic for you guys. I mean, what do you think about as far as risks of AI training AI in that aspect?
I mean, we've already had it. I mean, the reality is they've run out of relevant content, so they had to create their own.
Yeah.
Synthetic data is going to be a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So deriving the data, and there's a lot of narrative around that. You can there's a thing called model collapse where you can over reinforce something and end up getting a muddied mess. You don't get all the nuance, but that's kind of overtraining on a single use case, which can happen whether you're doing synthetic data or natural data. The problem with synthetic data is you might converge around certain ideas. So you need that variance in data to have, the nuances of the world. So, my guess is that the smart people putting these together understand that they're not going to overtrain it with just synthetic data. That if you use it smartly, that you can get better results. And there's so many ways that they measure the effectiveness of these things that they would back off if it started getting worse, right? So this is finding that happy medium. But I do think that that's a reality, is that we're going to use synthetic data to train. And that may be the path to super intelligence, really. So if we ever want to get smarter than a human, that may be one of the tools in the tool set for us getting fast and smarter than a human.
It's certainly not going to be Reddit. Reddit's not going to get us to
please.
super intelligent. So
Yeah, probably.
yeah, maybe that is
Or
reality.
Yeah.
What do you think?
My only concern is that while silicon advances, synapses don't. And so the human trainers, and even you said, as people are looking at it and they have to tweak something because the model's faster and faster, but wrong faster. That doesn't change the fact that we need to feed back and work with just the actual domain experts and individuals. So the people who are developing the models could be geniuses being paid a fortune, sitting in their offices in Sand Hill and Silicon Valley. But when it hits the trenches, we need to figure out a way to both educate, because the guardrails is one thing, but the guidance as far as teaching people what it is they're looking for. Yeah. Because the one thing I'm concerned with is that we give a lot of credit to technology. And so read this recently about this idea that effectively when an LLM comes back with an answer, we interpreted it as accurate and correct, and we don't know. The specific example actually was someone would feed a PDF to an LLM and have it read it, and then they would ask for it to interpret a contract, for instance, and then they'd ask the LLM about contract terms that it would have seen. Well, they don't know how well the model was able to actually interpret and read the PDF, because the PDF could have been like just grainy as heck, impossible to read and missing information. But an LLM wants to please you, so it'll come back with information that says these are the terms of a contract, and you as the human interacting with it don't know enough to know about the sort of the veracity and validity of that interpretation. So that's a big gap that I think we need to continue to address and develop the skills of the human sort of coaches and trainers. Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity with agency for us to mature the way that we interact, and even the expectation that a question and answer is the right way to do it, but the expectation that maybe it's multi-step and then we only trust it 50%. But even the notion that you can give one question. But I would say in my process, did I build my process and my agent to say, how readable was this document? How confident are you in this document quality?
Build in that level of self-validation and feedback. Otherwise, you just interpret that it nailed it. It totally understood that, and now it's smarter than me, and I defer to it from now on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And not only that, but I engage in that conversation with background agents who are experts in particular fields. All right. So in every conversation I have, now I can engage with, all right, I've got a legal expert on the back end,
right?
Who's going to evaluate what's being said. Right. I've got a brand expert, a marketing expert. You can filter all that through and then come down to, all right, hey, here's the safest path forward.
Yes.
For how to use this information.
And that still comes back to the gray matter of knowing who's on your bench, right? If you've got a really good defensive player and you don't know that person is good at that, you won't put them on the field. So you need to know who you've got. Which you can also ask some agent to say, who do I have and how best do I deploy the set of resources that I've got available to me? all about training the gray matter as well as advancing the silicon.
Yep.
I'm gonna steal for a second because I have to ask this question.
Please steal a second. Go for it. Kyle.
How long before work, and maybe this is a question I should ask you later, but I'm going to ask you now. How long before work as we know it is different? Because, and that's one of those questions where, from a reality perspective, like we talk about, for example, in the 90s, everything was going to be paperless.
Yes.
The paper consumption has gone up year over year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how long before the actual impact to work as we know it is materially different where we don't recognize it?
Right.
Yeah.
So I am a grumpy, pragmatic futurist because of examples like you just cited, because the paperless office caused us to print more than we ever did before, because the waves of early robotic process automation or more simple sort of script-oriented automations was supposed to remove 45% of jobs, and we found that it digitized elements and tasks and sequences, but actually made things much more complex. And so that said, I think we are working differently than we ever have before. I think as each of these new technologies introduces themselves, it presents a new lens through which we look at the way we do things.
Yeah.
So people get into, I mean, once you've run someone through a training program in any one of these categories of technology, they sit down at their desk the next moment and they say, well, that's pretty routine, mundane, transactional. I've been doing this drag and drop, click and paste sort of thing for too long. So we're aware of it.
But the big difference, though, is that RPA and automation and all these tools have been around for a while, and they've had in some cases, in a lot of cases, dramatic impacts on how work is done, but not to the average everyday worker. And in some instances, right? Or, where this has the possibility and capability of truly impacting everybody's.
So what excites me is this will bubble up rather than trickle down, I think.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm still fascinated by the concept of citizen development, which was sort of a term that people used a few years ago that has kind of fallen out of favor, but the concept is as strong as ever. Because you ask, I mean, most analyst reports now are coming out with just how many people are surreptitiously using AI in their work without their bosses and their managers and their executive leadership knowing. And it's because people, or they have that lens now. They're aware of what they do being automatable or augmentable in some way, and they're not getting the support. And so, in some cases they are. Maybe your Office 365 license gives you a Copilot and you start to tinker with that. Maybe you're able to use ChatGPT, depending on the industry you're in. If you're in banking, forget it. You can't do any of that stuff. But so people are starting to bring this in small ways to solve their problems discreetly. It's up to their enterprises to reward that behavior, study it, and sort of amalgamate it and say, okay, what every one of you independently is innovating, we can turn into a program. We can incentivize you to do it more coherently, and then we can really transform the way we do work. But part of that also means atomize everything we do down to bits so that your job isn't from beginning to end of accounts payable anymore. Your job is the parts where your human abilities make you the rock star and probably the rock star for the foreseeable future. But these agentic sort of digital twins, the colleagues, digital labor helpers, whatever we call them, can step in and take the other parts.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, the naming of agentic, like that should have been what we called the robot.
So
right?
I found, naming is fascinating. And so agent, I mean, my background was in outsourcing, where call center agents there were agents. That's what you were building, teams of agents all over the world.
Yeah.
And yet, ironically, those agents you never gave agency to, right? Those are not people you would say, you know what, handle my customer support claim whichever way you feel free to handle it, because I trust you because you're a human, you're dynamic, you're complex. You've spoken to a bunch of people in the past, you've got historical knowledge. You said, here is the script you've got to read, and here's the next best action, and we're going to have someone listen to you half the time and QA you. So agents didn't have agency, and now we've got this new sort of AI agent whose special sauce is apparently agency. And so we're just confusing our vocabulary because we got two different types of agents. One, you want to just follow the script, and the other, you want to be creative,
do its own thing.
And by the way, I'm not sure that we've picked the right one. I think the human perhaps should be the more creative, and the automation should follow the script for a while. Sorry.
No, and I think that is a segue into the kind of this idea that if we do get agents, if we want to think of for an MSP market. A level one, you talk about a repeatable process. That I know a lot of MSPs, if you talk to them, one of the challenges they have, especially with desktop support, et cetera, is that, they got 5 guys that are great, but the new guy keeps doing this one thing they wish he didn't. And you can write your SOPs and you can try to train, but he won't know those edge cases. So you do want to kind of mechanize that level one. So maybe that's the opportunity, is that we can have a level one. Well, if it fails or whatever, it only got 50% of my use cases, but now I have a software agent that filtered that and then maybe collect a little bit of data and then handled that to a human level 2 or a human level 3. And then as we work on it over time and these things get better, maybe we have some more things where level 2 gets to be put. But I mean, it's continuing to work on it and it's continuing to do it. But agency with predictable steps at step 1 and then handing off to a human.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So what's got you excited? Anything else?
What has me excited?
What's got you excited?
So agentic really does have, it has me both cautious and excited, because I think it reopens the discussion of how we look at work.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in the old 10 years ago in the automation space, we would look at work. If you did it right, you were a process person. So you were building a Visio diagram, or pick your tool, with a circle and some boxes and diamonds between it. And you needed to understand if that was the way you did it, then you needed to simplify it, because automation wasn't going to solve all your problems. And so process was the foundation for success. This agentic and agency starts to introduce the idea of how does each one of those boxes take on a personality and an identity of its own.
Right.
How do you train it to take advantage of all of your historical data and other external inputs that can make that box truly special and add a lot? And then you're not looking at end to end necessarily. You're looking at the top player in any one box being applied to. So to your point of in an MSP, if you've got a new joiner who's not great, you're able to emulate and copy paste the greatest in the world at whatever they do, and have just a rock star team. And that doesn't leave humans out, because humans are really good at doing human stuff, like building rapport and supporting customers and actually winning customers. And so I think that's exciting to me.
It's ironic that we had a MSP, a partner client of ours, who at one point for their level 1 techs, they hired, well, actually they would probably be 0.5 techs, because they hired non-technical people. Right. Because they were engaged in the interaction with the customer.
Totally.
They were the first person.
Right.
And how they supported that was they enabled them with a buddy system, and then automation, and their SOPs were just so well written that that person who wasn't technical didn't feel lost in a technical, challenge.
And I think there was an old story that, man, I wrote a white paper on this 10 years ago. But it was the study of manufacturing plants and their shift from hydraulic-driven machinery, so a water wheel next to a river with a drive shaft down the middle of the factory with all of the machines off the drive shaft, so it was very linear, to then switching to electricity. And that first generation of managers on that first wave of electricity didn't move the machines. They were still in a linear fashion because that's where they'd always been.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, young Turks would come in and say, well, this is dumb. Why are things where they are? And they sort of wouldn't remember. And then they say, well, it'd make more sense if we had 2 here and then move this one over here. And I think this is exactly that too. Does it make sense to have a level 1 tech? Well, that's the way we've always done it. But now we don't necessarily need to do it that way.
Yeah.
We can have just a human who goes, man, I feel your pain and I really want to help, and just be empathetic, which would win most customers over. And then they can hand it off to a different set of agents that are reorganized differently.
So the irony, though, is that technology in your example, it took 70 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
It took 70 years to get from the introduction of, hey, I can get rid of steam
Yes.
and have electricity drive this machine. It took 70 years before that machine became electric.
Right. And so even if, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll just interject real quick that I think that, I'm postulating here a little bit, but I think that's where the disruption in this revolution is going to come from. If this is the AI revolution, which I kind of think it is, the 4th industrial revolution, I think they're not overblown. I think, where we are in that journey might be overblown, but this journey is going to happen. I think the disruptors will be the people that imagine the world as if AI had existed, not the world as it exists and tries to Salt Bay. That's what I said. Try to sprinkle on some AI to what we have, but thinks of it as completely as if AI existed the day I founded this company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was paving cow paths, right? You just that's the road. Let's put concrete or asphalt on it. Is not us challenging convention and asking why do we do the things that we do. I refer to this as process sediment, where right, you layer upon layer how you did it, how you did QA, and how you had a human check this. And one time somebody made a mistake, so we changed the process, and now we do it this way. And nobody remembers why it is that way, but you've got these layers of process sediment. You have to challenge that convention. Otherwise, you're just incrementally sort of scratching at the way that work is done.
And there's a lot to be gained doing incremental with AI because it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, I think we do have to ask ourselves, what's our first principles on this problem?
Well, and to be fair, though, like the human element of this historical problem that we're chasing is we have terrible memory.
Yeah.
And AI does not. So, I don't remember why we made that change a year ago, and I was involved in it.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
But that's not the case with AI. So the path forward is one that's going to move faster because the results are going to be that much better.
Yeah.
And once people, and this happens with any new technology, once people see the benefit, right, adoption curve goes through the roof, right? And we've seen that with AI, even in its rawest, least useful form. The shadow AI use is taking off.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's going to continue. My favorite analogy for what you talked about earlier is the daughter decides to cook the Christmas ham this year for the first time, and she gets the recipe from her mom. And step 5 is cut the ham in half. And she calls her mom and says, "Why am I cutting the ham in half?" And she says, "I don't know, call your grandma." And she called her grandma and said, "Grandma, why is step 5 cut the ham in half?" She said, "Oh, I never had a pan big enough to cook the whole ham."
There you go.
But her mom's been cutting the ham in half every year.
Exactly. Process sediment. And it was there for a reason. We don't remember what the reason is, and we just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, there's safety in consistency. So the way we've always done it is cornerstone of most transformation discussions that you have to contend with. And this begs you to challenge the way you do absolutely everything.
Which leads me to this thought. I've, over the course of the last several years, I consider myself to be a prompt engineer, at a fairly decent level.
Yeah.
But in the same way that I've chased solving problems in the past, when I go look for data or look for information, right? I Google the thing I'm trying to solve for. But we all figured out that I can't Google the big picture to get to the information that I need to solve the tasks. I have to Google my specific tasks to get the relevant data that I need to solve that task. Well, I started chasing that the same way with AI, and I realized I'm cutting AI short because it doesn't know what I'm trying to solve for. So if I broaden back my query and give it all the information, so basically I brain dump as much as possible with what I'm trying to solve for, I will get to the individual tasks, and it will be able to help me streamline to the individual task. But I'm not leaving out relevant information that would help shape the outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've fundamentally rewritten your source code to think differently about this problem.
And it hurt.
Yeah.
It was difficult to get to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've trained
It
myself.
didn't take you 70 years.
No, this is true. This is true.
Right.
But
Or it did, and you look great.
I mean, one of the two. He might be a vampire.
no, there's I can't help but sit here literally as you're talking, get excited, because I'm always looking at the next step. And what does that mean? What's the next step? And when I'm 3 steps down the road, what does that mean? And it's pretty stinking cool.
Right. But do those 3 steps look the same when you get there as you envisioned them looking?
I
Like
know.
that's what's wild to me
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what we think the next 3 steps are going to be aren't the next 3 steps. And we go, wait, how did we get here? And then look back and realize that somewhere along those 3 steps, we moved.
Yeah.
Like it's very much a moving frontier right now.
And what's exciting but frightening about that journey is that it is almost impossible to anticipate the order in which you're going to go. The constants, the things you know for a fact are that enterprises change a heck of a lot more slowly than technology evolves.
Right.
That most of the barriers to any change have nothing to do with the technology's capability or speed or anything else. It comes with resistance to change, just organizational fiefdom and structure, lack of any reliable data,
Absolutely.
and a lack of understanding about the process. And so you couple that with, again, this grassroots concept of the individual in the trench knows most intimately what it is that they do and what it is they're trying to do. And you generally don't give them the reins. You don't say, like, you know what, we've just allocated a $50 million budget and we're going to give it to the front office call center staff to do whatever they want to with it to make calls delightful for our end customer. And so you're going to have that dynamic. But this grassroots sort of citizen movement, especially as some of this stuff is permeating in ways that are almost impossible to stop, are going to dictate that direction of travel.
Absolutely.
To get wherever we end up going.
So I just want to say, viewers, if you have any thoughts on this, we'd love to see them, love to hear what you have to say about this, because it's a fascinating topic. Now, in interest of time, I do want to kind of dig into our main subject today, which is really that intersection of AI, machine learning, and intelligent automation or hyper automation, right? So I'm going to pitch this to the 3 of you. Can any of the 3 of you give me a quick definition to kind of explain the difference between AI, machine learning, and hyper automation or intelligent automation?
let's let the guy who wrote the book
I'm out there. I tucked my nose.
take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think a new title for your next book should be The Book on whatever
The
the
book,
subject
The
is.
book on
Yeah.
the Bible on. We did write something called the RPA Bible 10 years ago, 12 years ago. We were a little concerned that it might be taken the wrong way. But so this is where you get my grumpy pragmatist side
Love it.
again,
Let's hear it.
because I will start with AI.
Mhm.
I would assert AI has no definition and is undefinable. I think it is a broad
right.
concept that speaks to a whole bunch of constituent parts that AI itself carries all of our hopes and dreams around math and algorithm able to do some complex stuff.
Okay. All right.
Because personally, I faced this challenge for quite a while where I would work with prospective clients and they would say to me, as I was pitching RPA at the time, and they would say to me, well, why do I need RPA if I can just use AI? And I would remind myself, it's probably unlikely to win this client's business if I jump across the table and start to throttle them. That's not the thing I should do.
Right.
But the point is, you don't even know what you're asking. I don't know what you're asking. There is no clear definition other than sort of IBM Watson commercials at the time that were saying it can do anything.
And do anything. Magic.
Right. So then if you dial that back, the reason I like intelligent automation as a canopy under which these capabilities sit is, for my simple mind, I align them to human capabilities.
Okay.
And that's kind of what we did in the book, which is we take a look at there's vision, there's language, there's execution, and there's thinking and learning. And ultimately, that's what these algorithms do. So from a vision perspective, it's looking at a PDF or a piece of paper or an image or a video. It's understanding what it's seeing, it's interpreting it, and it's giving it some sort of meaning.
Okay.
So it used to be called character recognition, OCR.
Right.
IDP is a new name that's sort of popped up in the last few years, intelligent document processing. But that is a subcomponent of AI.
Okay.
Looking
Fantastic.
at that. Language is another one. It's you talking to that cylinder on your kitchen counter and asking it whether grapes are poisonous to dogs as your dog wants to eat your salad, sort of thing. That's understanding and interpreting sound, which is also hugely important to those assistants, whether it be Siri or Alexa or whatever, Cortana.
Right.
And now equally as important to all of the generative AI.
You just said
stuff.
Cortana, and
I know, right?
I laughed a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I did a great post on that on my MySpace page. You should totally you should check that out. And then you get to, so vision and language. Execution is the act of actually being able to do something.
Right.
And so that was RPA, which is now becoming more and more these large action models / agentic, which is, large language models can write you a limerick, can write you code, can make you a cool, funky picture, but it can't onboard a new employee. It can't pay an invoice. So these agentic executional capabilities do that. They actually can control buttons in applications and move data or,
Right.
And then the thinking and learning, that final quadrant was looking at data, parsing it, mining it, understanding, interpreting meaning and direction, and anticipating where the next sort of outcome or answer might be. And so I think within those four categories, you have a lion's share of what falls under what people refer to as AI.
Okay.
And in many cases, they hope AI can do it all.
Right.
But again, it's sort of like we talked about before we went live. It's like rocking up with a toolkit, putting down your toolbox, opening it up, and having just one magical tool in it that no one can define. You're not sure when to use it, but you're certain it can build every house you've ever wanted, versus having the tools that you can actually converse about. Right? I need a hammer, I need a saw, I need a screwdriver, I need a whatever, and they're all there. Together, they create value.
Yep.
And it's my job to figure out what I want to create, like what that outcome is, and then look at the toolkit and say, okay, I'll need a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And by the way, humans are part of that toolkit as well. I need some of those as well.
That's a good point, is, the human being part of the toolkit.
Absolutely.
Like, to Keith's point earlier, you can't just like Salt Bae a little bit of AI in there and say, oh yeah, we're utilizing AI. Like, you got to have the kit. Yeah, people do all the time.
Well, mostly to get funding.
Yeah. And that's what people see through that.
So,
I would only add that we all the things you described. I think there is a neural net for it, right?
Okay.
But there isn't one neural net for it. Like the neural net's kind of been called a universal function approximator. Like we can model something in it, but you're probably not going to model a classifier and an image generator into you might, but or a text generator. Like these kind of multimodal aren't as sophisticated as the brain is yet. I think there's a long way to go until we understand how I can eat a banana and do as many computations as something that takes an entire city's worth of electricity to run. Right. So we've got 100 trillion neurons right now. They're still sitting around 1 trillion. Right. So I think how we program it, how we extract data, I think we can at least imagine that those connections could be made if there was the right way to train, and that those associations and the things that we do in our head and whatever's making me say the next word I'm saying, like whatever's doing that, and the training and knowledge and experience are all in a way algorithms themselves, right? So there's parallels there that gives at least a glimpse into the possibility that if we're a mile or two into our marathon, that we could encode some more and more and more of those things and more of those associations as we scale. And we scale the 1,000,000x in 10 years. If there's another 10,000x or something, maybe we can at least imagine that more and more of this is encoded. But we're not there, right?
Right.
We're not there right now. We've got to figure out where its limitations are, feed it well, put guardrails around it, and use it for the use cases it works for.
Well, and I guess some of that's an engineering challenge, which is fascinating. But the operational challenge of you don't need every employee in your business to be the absolute expert at every function in your business.
Right.
And so I think the combinatorial innovation that comes from having a really good document reader and a really good, ticket responder and a really good invoice transactor.
Yeah.
That's, again, you have a team of rock stars that are subspecialized, and maybe they combine in some way someday, but you almost want to keep them separate just because businesses, as much as it would pain me when they say this, they're all special and different. So every client you work with does it a different way, and you want to take that subspecialty and then customize it to how they onboard an employee or a customer or pay a bill. So,
Ian, let's get personal. Do you have kids?
I do have kids.
How old are they?
2, 14 and 12.
14 and 12. Like 5 years ago, 4 years, 3 years, a year ago, somebody asked, say, what do you think your kids should do?
Yes.
Right. And the default answer, there's three answers, right? There's, hey, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go be a programmer. But for in the tech space, it was like, hey, let's go be a programmer.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one. And that was the whole Sam Altman and Jensen Huang and others that said, and this is why I think, and their pivot was away from knowing how to write this esoteric language that communicates with computers to being an expert in a domain and understanding what good looks like, because the challenge of communicating with the computer just got a heck of a lot easier.
Right.
And that's where I think, again, back to the citizenry concept, if you're a good product designer, you don't need to be a coder. You can be building that product. So am I pushing Python classes?
Yeah.
No. I don't know. Just what do they want to be happy doing? What can they do from anywhere so they don't have to go into an office and I support them. At this point, I just want them off their iPhones, and it would be cool if they fed the dog every once in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
So interesting challenge though. If in order to get to domain expertise,
Yes.
you've got to be plugged into a domain.
So this, I also think, is a fascinating paradox that we need to figure out how to solve. Because I'll try to shorten the story, but in outsourcing, in BPO, where I spent the first half of my career, you would have the project leads, part of the business development team, were people who I'd work with who were domestic. They were in America. They were from like Dallas, and they started their career on the bottom rung of an accounts payable department. And they were literally matching documents, et cetera. They worked their way up to team lead. They understood it, and now they're in a more senior role. Then we moved most of those transactional tasks to India, let's say. And so people who started bottom rung are now working their way up, and they're the experts, and they're the ones who are running operations. When you digitize that, and there is no way for people to gain that context and actual task understanding of a domain, then how do you nurture and develop the leaders of the future in a way that they actually are context aware and not just sort of taking orders from a bot because they have no idea how an invoice is processed and paid? And I don't know what the answer is other than to be that co-pilot and give them that transparency into this is how the process goes, even if you never did it yourself ever in your career.
But to be fair, it also requires the user to have the yearning to understand that, because by nature, most of us are lazy and looking for a shortcut.
Yes.
And if the shortcut is in front of us, we will just take the shortcut and push the button.
And then that challenges your ability to unpick and root cause analyze, because you don't understand why we do any of that, which further embeds that process sediment of like, we just cut the ham in half. Like, that's what we do. I don't know why it says we do that.
I just did what it told me to do.
Yeah, just did what it told me to do. I've never done this before. I didn't have to start my career doing this. And, that's career independent. That's lawyers who don't have to do research and prior art. That is coders who don't have to code.
Yeah.
That is customer service people who don't have to actually, pick the next best action because it's just fed to them,
Yep.
or they don't have to talk to anyone because it's done for
How
them.
do we know that it's not, my grandfather saying these cars, they're never going to learn how to change a horseshoe?
Right.
Like, again, we have to go back to, are we assuming that those roles and responsibilities are what the organization looks like?
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's the bigger variable but one thing we do know is that almost every generation figures it out pretty well.
Yeah.
Right. Like we worry that they're not going to know whatever, but they're going to see the world through the light they grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to know more about an iPhone than we will.
Absolutely.
And they're going to know more about AI than we will. So
100%.
right. So that's I feel like every generation worries about the next one. They're not going to know what I know. Some of that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, and what I see as I delete streaming tools from my phone, and I sort of I deleted TikTok, and then I moved over to YouTube Shorts, and I moved over to Instagram Shorts recently.
Yeah.
I'll delete that tonight. But it seems like most of the young generation are side hustling like crazy, and
Yes.
and back to combinatorial innovation, they'll say like, I can make $20,000 a month using these 7 tools, and then they stitch together what they do, and it's really sophisticated.
Yeah.
Like I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
And
Very entrepreneurial generation.
Totally.
I can tell you.
absolutely.
Right. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So guys, we got like maybe 10 minutes left, and I want to touch on, this is a great conversation. Let's talk about what the opportunity for everything we've talked about today is going to look like for the MSP space. There's really great subjects that we've touched on, things like intelligent automation and where that's going. So Ian, I want to kick it off to you first. Yep. What do you see as like the biggest opportunity for MSPs? I mean, we've talked about process settlement and getting rid of that, but what do you see as kind of that major step?
So again, I'm always back to fundamentals and outcomes and process. And so in any industry, any service industry, you've got a front, middle, and back. MSPs are no different. So working back to front, from a back office perspective, MSPs have to onboard and offboard customers. They have to issue invoices. They have to consolidate who is registered and authorized to be able to access certain systems. They have to keep track of ongoing access to things. Then you move so that all of that is routine and rule-based to an extent, and a lot of that can be augmented with automation. To enable them to spend time where it matters, supporting the customers in their real time of need. Middle office is really the act of being an MSP, and that can be consolidating subscriptions, that can be keeping real-time access to status of assets. Are they on, are they off, are they? So that is also hugely automatable. Yeah. And then the front office side of things of just issue resolution, ticket receipt and response, as you were saying too, you can basically create these real-time conversations. So it's not just creating a more valuable ticket where it adds context of like, this was raised, but this is the client, these are the systems they have, this is the problems they've historically had, this is what we did last time that worked real quickly. But you can also engage in discussion. So you can make a really delightful engagement from a customer support standpoint. So all of those are the fundamental building blocks of what makes a managed service good in general. And each of them calls on those different tools, right? Again, toolkit, it's not one thing that solves all the problems. So it really comes down to the MSP and their team to look through that lens and say, how do we make every step of what we do better? And these technologies can do that.
That's fantastic. Gents?
I would, I would have pointed out the last 2 you did, but I've got, I think another thing that we see from MSP, some people are looking for an exit. It's a legacy. They're looking for what they're going to do, what they've built over 20 or 30 years. I think AI does offer the opportunity to, I don't think it's as mature as it's going to be, but to take your knowledge and train into a model, your recipe, right? Because at the end of the day, there's you, and you are what differentiates your legacy is all the things that you've learned over those years and all the mistakes and solutions you've come up with. And I do think that there really is an opportunity down the line to, and it may take the form of these agents. Like I have an agent that makes this decision on a help desk ticket, and I have this agent that makes a ticket whether we should, keep this customer or not. All of these things that make up your decision making. Maybe we can start to get those encoded so that you can be on the beach some days and still trust that things are getting executed the way you like.
Right. So I see we have a hot take on from a LinkedIn user saying, I'd also argue that small businesses also just buy a service that does a thing and then they don't care how it works. Just don't let it break, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just work on growth without knowing really how to invoice or get paid or do taxes or any of the things that it takes to run a thing.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm a huge fan of the as a service because it directs all of your energy to an outcome and an experience. Because I think it's like anything else. Some people love to know how many cylinders are in their car and how much horsepower and how many doohickeys and
zero.
And some people just know that they need to get to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would argue that most people know that they just need to get to work and they need it to be reliable. They need it to start when they turn the key or hit the button or whatever. And so I think the as a service sort of outcome-based model, especially for smaller and medium businesses that just don't have the bandwidth or the budget to hire the gearheads and the geeks who want to know what's underneath the hood. So they just want it to work. I think it's a tremendous model. And again, it's a reasonable way to just sort of OpEx price it into the way you run your business and just get stuff done
until it breaks and you've got to call a mechanic and you know nothing about how it works.
Well,
and the mechanic gets to take advantage because you know nothing about how it works.
Well, I mean,
I'm speaking from personal
experience
because
but that's an interesting one, right? Because I guess it depends on what is it that breaks and how is a mechanic taking advantage. Because the alternative is you hire a dev team that each cost $150,000 a year for you, and you tinker and you build a whole bunch of science projects that don't manifest as operating systems, and you spend millions where you could have spent thousands. But yeah, you have less visibility as to what's behind the curtain.
In your analogy, I think he's saying that you would get Uber, right? And you would pay someone to get you to where you need to be, as opposed to, renting a car.
Yeah, which is a whole lot easier. And then if they, and I think this is a great opportunity, if they build the platform and the right amount of visibility that you need, and continue to inform you, so it's not like just shut up and pay your monthly bill, and because that's no way to keep a client happy. And then hopefully it doesn't break because that's part of your contract. If it does blow up in a famous manner, then you have to sort that out.
Yeah.
This is the landscape that our partners, our clients, our customers chase is constantly creating value. And this is another opportunity for AI is to, hey, what have we done this month for you? Right. Okay, well, great. Well, instead of underselling or overselling, and how about we just actually accurately articulate everything we've done for you? Because it becomes impossible to capture all that information. Well, now I can, right? There are seemingly no limits to, right? What information do I want to make available to what people for what reason? I now can.
And some of that's predicated on your extent of access, right? So traditionally in my BPO world, we had telematics. We knew how many people showed up at work, how long they worked, how many calls they took, but I didn't know what happened in your systems as far as whether the deals were closed, whether they solved the ticket. So there's got to be a level of collaborative trust to give you access to that data. But if you have it, then you're right. Then you're a kid in a candy store, and these algorithms allow you to do some really valuable things with it.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time for today. I know.
I'm not happy about this.
I know. I'm never happy about us being
Yeah.
out of time. These conversations are always so good.
We shouldn't be defined by time.
We-
We can just
We
keep
should.
going.
Time's a construct anyway.
We've got to do another one of these.
We do. We have to.
You gotta come
Absolutely.
back.
So we've got to each
I'd love
I'll
to.
give up my seat if you want a regular spot on.
I, just
You heard it
just
here first,
undefeated.
folks.
I just get you.
So
I would love to come back.
All
It's a lot of fun.
we will get you back.
Thanks.
In the meantime, you should definitely check out Ian's book, Intelligent Automation. And I think did you mention you might have another book coming out soon?
Yeah, thank you for letting me plug this.
Yeah.
Again, the fascination of the evolution of humans are becoming more technical, as we talked about. They're getting more comfortable with this stuff, especially that grassroots. And technology is becoming more human. It's just becoming that much easier for individuals to understand and to build with. Large language models have made that even more possible. And so the citizenry concept is going to flourish in every nook and cranny of every enterprise in every country in the world. And so that the new book is an examination of the role of citizen developers, citizen automators, and citizen data scientists. And the title of the book is All Hands on Tech, like all hands on deck,
Love
but it effectively the democratization of all these domain experts can all start to play a role in digitizing their specific tasks and their organizations.
Love it.
There
Well,
you
Ian, we are thrilled to have you. So
No,
again,
it's great to
check
be
out
here.
his books, Intelligent Automation and All Hands on Tech, coming soon. And we'll catch everybody on the next episode where we're going to be talking a little bit about prompt engineering, I believe. So that'll be a fun topic.
Very
So
good.
make sure you tune in next time. We'll see you then.
Thank you.